Shabbat Shalom. We have a holiday coming up, and I don't just mean Shabbat. We have a holiday of Purim. Exactly right. Next Thursday night and Friday morning, 6 o'clock for those of you who join us, whether it be here in person, socially distanced, mask required, all of the usual precautions, or through our live stream or through our Zoom. Link in the handout as well as on our most recent email. Commercial over. But there is something special about the holiday of Purim. Something special about every holiday, but there is something absolutely, utterly unique about the story of Purim from among all of the books of the Tanakh, all of the books of the Bible. And it is something that absolutely infuriates many scholars because it just seems so out of place. God is absent from the book. You can start chapter 1, verse 1, read all the way through chapter 10, and you will never once encounter the name of God or even a title for God. And it is the only book in the entire Tanakh that has this unique feature. Now, it is such a head-scratcher of how in the world can there be a book in the Bible that doesn't mention God, but some of the earlier sages tried to sort of shoehorn God in to the narrative. To say, well, there is one place where we use one of the names of God, or one of the references of God. If you are a quick hearer in Hebrew, you may notice that when we do the extension of condolences to those who are mourning, we use the title of God of Hamakom, which literally translates to be the place. Now, if you are also an astute reader of the story of the book of Esther, you will know that in the 4th chapter, when Mordecai and Esther are sending tweets back and forth, that he warns her that she has been uniquely positioned in the palace to be able to provide deliverance of our people from the threat that Haman poses. But if she doesn't, if she chickens out and just thinks that she's going to be saved, she will not be saved, but help will come mimakom acher, from another place. Makom. Some would say, some of the early sages, there's God, makom, right? Help will come from hamakom acher, the other place. It doesn't actually really fit. Indeed, Stephen Ezra, the great medieval scholar, says, look, guys, I want God to be in the book as much as anyone else. But that's not God. And that's just the word place. And what Mordecai is saying is that if she doesn't do something, God, by implication, but not on the text, will provide a deliverance from some other avenue. It is what it says it is. And trying to put the word makom into the divine sense simply doesn't work, because indeed the word makom, although it became a later rabbinic title for God, is never once used throughout the rest of the Bible to refer to God. The word simply doesn't have that connotation in biblical literature. You have to wait 500 or more years before it becomes a rabbinic convention. So it's an anachronism to believe that there, of all places, makom is referring to God. So even Ezra is left. He has to try and explain, why is God then not written into the text anywhere? Why leave the nebulous and implied presence of God? There will be a deliverance. Why not say God will save us from some other way? And he offers a very interesting explanation. He says, look, this book was written by Mordecai at the instruction of Esther. And as such, it was written as almost an official Persian government document. Indeed, we know that there were letters written with the instructions of the king regarding the ability of the Jews to defend themselves that were sent out in all the languages, all the different satraps, counties of the Persian Empire. So that means that it would have been translated into Persian. In fact, the Persians probably would have had their own version of the event within their own histories. And if there's one thing we know about the foreign idolatrous world, they like to scratch out one god and replace it with another. But we see this throughout ancient ruins and throughout ancient places across the world, where a person another, and they will claim the holy site of the previous culture for their own, and will dedicate it now in the name of their God. Basically, sort of one-upsmanship of your God's out, our God's in, and we're renaming this, and we're calling it by the name of our God. Even Ezra argues that Mordecai was worried. He knew that if this document would be promulgated throughout the Persian Empire, but the Persians would simply look at this and say, your God, good name saved you. No. Our God saved you. And simply replace the name of God in all of the places it appeared for the name of one of their deities. That it would become a vehicle for their own idolatrous propaganda rather than a uniquely Jewish name. I think even Ezra might be onto something here. But whether or not that is historically precisely what was going through Mordecai's head when he wrote down the final version is less important than what it teaches us in general about the Jewish relationship to God's name. You may have noticed in your own encounters with other people around the world that some people really like to say the names of their gods. That it is something that they will drop into a conversation at every opportunity. It will be at the beginning, middle, and end of the sentences. And it's almost like the name dropping of, oh, didn't I tell you that I was best friends with celebrity X? It's almost overdone from the Jewish sensibility. In the Jewish sensibility, God's name is not something to be bandied about with such familiarity. God's name is not something to be used as a badge of honor. We do not plaster God's name across t-shirts. We do not put it onto bumper stickers. We don't hand it out as buttons or pamphlets at fairgrounds. God's name is something that is holy, private, and special. And instead, we want to show our allegiance to God rather than name-dropping. We do actions. If we want to show our allegiance to God, we don't brag about our closeness to God. We simply, quietly, get on with the business of God. We don't have to see God's name in neon to know that God is present at that moment. Instead, we simply have to see that God is presented to us an occasion where we can take action, where we can perform one of the commandments, to be able to fulfill that at that time. And at that moment, we connect with God. At that moment, we feel God. At that moment, we make God revealed in the world. And we don't need to stick God's name all over it for that to be accomplished. There is an understatedness to Judaism. There is a focus on action to Judaism. There is an emphasis on doing the deed rather than talking about the deed. And there is an emphasis on following God rather than preaching about God. And the book of Esther is where we see this template most clearly throughout the entire Tanakh. It is where we see an entire nation that is under threat. And rather than hearing the word God over and over and over again, we see them get down to work. We see them recognize that they can see the threat and they can see the opportunities and they will take the matter into their hands because they know that's what God wants. They know God doesn't want them to be exterminated. They know God does not want this wicked Haman to be able to be victorious. And so they do what God has shown them to do. And they do not need flashing lights to recognize it. How far we have come at this point in our history. From a people that needed to be led out like infants from the land of Egypt, to a people who are willing to take their steps forward on their own 2 feet and say, I know what must be done because God has taught me, and I don't have to talk about it anymore. I just need to do it. The celebration of Purim comes at the end of the holiday cycle for precisely this reason. To remind us that Judaism is not about boasting and bragging about our relationship with God. It is about living a humble and perfect life, walking with God, loving what is right, doing what is just, and knowing that God is with us, whether his name is emblazoned across the sky, or as is more common, not. Shabbat Shalom.